When Shaquille O'Neal stepped through the tall French doors of the Lemoyne Mansion on St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans, Louisiana, at 7:51 on a Saturday evening in late October, he was not dressed like a man worth $400 million. He wore a dark gray suit cut simply, a white shirt with no tie, the top button open, leather shoes that were comfortable rather than expensive, no watch, no ring, no assistant. Just a small leather portfolio under one arm and an invitation in the inside pocket of his jacket. The ballroom smelled like beeswax from the candles in the chandeliers, magnolia from arrangements set every 12 feet along the marble floor, and the faintest underneath of furniture polish on wood that had been in the building since before the Civil War. A jazz quartet played quietly in the far corner. 230 people in evening wear stood in clusters with champagne flutes that did not move much. Near a tall portrait of a man in a high white collar, painted in 1838, holding court by the fireplace, stood a slim, white-haired man in his late 60s in a tuxedo cut by hand. And the moment Shaq stepped past the second column, that man's eyes locked onto him, and a small, careful smile moved across his mouth. His name was Beauregard Lemoyne IV. He was worth $1.8 billion. He was the great-great-grandson of the man in the portrait. He had been waiting for this, and Shaquille O'Neal walked toward the donor's wall and said absolutely nothing. He noticed the first thing before he reached the wall, the portrait above the fireplace. Beneath it, on a small engraved brass plate, the name Augustine Beauregard Lemoyne, 1798 to 1862. And underneath that, in smaller letters, Founder. The face in the portrait was the face of the man near the fireplace, 60 years older. He noticed the second thing as he passed the second column. A glass display case mounted in the wall, containing a single folded document under museum glass, labeled Lemoyne Plantation Ledger, 1841, with one yellowed page visible through the glass and a column of pencil-faded names down the left margin he could not read at that distance. He noticed the third thing on the donor's wall itself when he stopped in front of it, a row of small bronze plates, each one engraved with a year and a name and a dollar amount, going back to 1947, and three of them in a row near the bottom. 2021, 2022, 2023 bore the same anonymized name, a friend of the archive. He noticed the fourth thing on a side table near the bar, a small framed photograph of a worn cotton field at sunset somewhere south of Baton Rouge, with fine engraved type on the bottom edge reading, Former Lemoyne Property, circa 1859. Shaq looked at it for 2 full seconds. He filed it all away. He kept walking. Now here is the part nobody in that ballroom understood yet. Here is the secret Shaquille O'Neal had been carrying for the last 4 years. The thing Beauregard Lemoyne IV had absolutely no idea about as he sipped a bourbon by the fireplace and rehearsed the question he had been waiting to ask. One single line of pencil-faded handwriting on page 47 of a plantation ledger from 1841 had set in motion a quiet 4-year project that had been running through 3 universities, 2 genealogists, and a small archive in Baton Rouge. What was about to happen near the fireplace would not be settled by money or by family name. It would be settled by a single name, spoken out loud, that had not been spoken in this building in 183 years. Stay with us for the whole video, because what you are about to see is not a story about a billionaire mocking a basketball player. It is a story about 2 families running on completely separate tracks for almost 2 centuries, about to be revealed in front of 230 witnesses to have been on the same track all along. He was born in Newark, New Jersey, in 1972. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was a small woman who held 2 full-time jobs and never once let her son believe that smallness and softness were the same word. She taught him a sentence, sitting on the front steps of their apartment building in East Orange when he was 10, holding a small spiral notebook in her lap that had her grandmother's name written on the front in pencil and not much else inside. She said, "Baby, you remember this. They will tell you your story doesn't go back. They will tell you the records don't exist. They will tell you to let it go. You don't let it go. You go find it. Your name was on a page somewhere before they were finished with it. Go find the page." He was 10. He never forgot a word of it. His biological father was absent, and into that space stepped a man named Philip Harrison, a sergeant in the United States Army who married Lucille and became, in every way that mattered, Shaq's father. Philip had one rule he said so often it stopped being a sentence and became weather. He said it driving to school. He said it after games. He said it the night before Shaq left for LSU, the morning of the NBA draft, and in the hospital the year before he died. Don't be a reaction, be a response. Philip said it the way other men say grace. Philip Harrison is the ghost of one of Shaq's lives. The other ghost, the older one, the one Shaq had only recently learned the name of, was a woman named Cordelia, born in 1825, who had been a child of 7 when she was first listed on page 47 of a plantation ledger in Iberville Parish, Louisiana. Cordelia is the ghost of this story. She has been dead since 1893. She has been alive again in Shaq's research notebook for the last 4 years. LSU. Drafted first overall by the Orlando Magic in 1992. 3 championships in a row with the Lakers and 1 more with Miami. A doctorate in education. 4 years ago, his mother had handed him the small spiral notebook with her grandmother's name on the front in pencil, and she had said, "I am getting old. You have the resources. Go find the page." Shaq had been finding it ever since. Beauregard Lemoyne IV was 68. He had been born in a house 7 blocks from the mansion to a family that had been wealthy for so long the wealth had stopped feeling like a fact and started feeling like a personality trait. He had inherited his first $80 million at 23, his next $200 million when his father died in 1998, and the rest had accumulated quietly through real estate the family had been buying since the 1870s. He was, in most measurable ways, a successful man. He was also, in ways he had never been required to examine, a frightened one. His grandfather had spent the last 20 years of his life sitting in the upstairs library researching the family's pre-war history and refusing to share what he had found. And his grandfather had died at 91 without ever speaking the names that were in the ledger downstairs out loud. Beauregard had inherited the library. He had inherited the ledger. He had never read past page 6. He had decided, decades ago, that the past was the past, and that the present was where men with breeding lived. He had also developed a quiet, reflexive habit of asking black men who entered his ballrooms whether they knew where they came from, the way other men ask about the weather, because it pleased something in him that he did not have a name for. He had decided 2 months earlier, when the society announced Shaq as a major donor, that tonight he would ask the question one more time in front of cameras. He had rehearsed it twice in the upstairs library. The second time, alone with a bourbon in his hand, he had smiled at his own setup. The gala was for the Louisiana Historical Preservation Society. A retired judge from the Fifth Circuit named Justice Marguerite Boudreau, 74, with her hair pinned in a low chignon and her hands folded the way her grandmother had taught her, was seated at table 3 and had been watching Beauregard Lemoyne from across the room for 20 minutes, the way a woman watches a fire she has decided not to put out yet. A young black archivist named Tobias Green, 31, on staff at the society for the last 4 years, was standing near the donor's wall in a borrowed tuxedo, pretending to fix a cufflink. A reporter from the Times-Picayune named Camille Devereaux, 36, with a notepad in her hand and a recorder in her clutch, was 3 feet behind Beauregard. Within 4 minutes of Shaq accepting a glass of sparkling water at the bar, Beauregard had crossed the marble floor with 2 society board members in tow, stopped 6 feet in front of him, and tilted his head the way men tilt their heads when they have already decided the outcome of a conversation that has not begun. The quartet was between songs. Half the ballroom heard him say, in a voice pitched to carry, "Mr. O'Neill, we are so honored. Tell me, I always like to ask my guests of color this. Do you know where you actually come from? Most people in your position cannot say. The records, unfortunately, are quite limited. But it's never too late to take an interest in heritage. We pride ourselves on that here." One of the board members behind him let out a small, uncomfortable laugh. The others smiled tightly. Camille Devereaux's recorder was already running. Tobias Green's cufflink stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing in the ballroom moved. The beeswax smell got sharper, the way smells do when a room goes quiet. The quartet started the next song and stopped 2 notes in. Justice Boudreau's folded hands did not move, but her eyes did. Shaq did not say anything for a full 4 seconds. He looked at Beauregard the way a man looks at a face he has studied at length in archived photographs he is not yet ready to mention. He set his glass down on a passing tray. He looked briefly at the glass display case. He looked briefly at the portrait of Augustin Beauregard Lemoine above the fireplace. He looked briefly at Tobias Green near the donor's wall. And then, in the voice his mother had used on the front steps in East Orange 38 years ago, he opened the small leather portfolio he had been carrying under his arm, took out a single piece of paper, and held it, but did not unfold it. He said very quietly, "Sir, may I ask you a question back, in front of these people, the way you asked me?" Beauregard's smile flickered. He said with a small, forced laugh, "By all means. But before you hear what Shaq asked, you need to feel the full weight of what came before it, because what is about to happen in front of that fireplace is not a small thing, and the small thing it pretends to be is the disguise the large thing always wears." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire ballroom held its breath. Shaq did one quiet thing. He unfolded the paper exactly once, just enough for Beauregard to see the photocopy of an old handwritten page, brown at the edges, with a column of names down the left margin, and held it up so Beauregard could read the line Shaq was pointing to. He said, in the same quiet voice, "Sir, does the name Cordelia mean anything to you? Cordelia, age 7, page 47, Lemoyne Plantation Ledger, March of 1832. Recorded value, $400. Mother listed only as Annie, father not listed. Sold to your great-great-grandfather Augustine by a planter in Charleston on a Tuesday morning. The page is in your display case, 10 feet from where we are standing. I have been reading that page for 4 years." Beauregard Lemoyne IV did not speak. His mouth opened in stages, the way mouths open when the brain is rewriting the last 2 minutes of a man's life in real time. The 2 board members behind him took one full step back without realizing they had done it. Camille Devereaux's recorder was still running. Tobias Green had put one hand on the donor's wall to steady himself. Justice Boudreau had placed her hands flat on the tablecloth in front of her. Shaq said, still quietly, "Cordelia was my great-great-grandmother. She was your family's property until 1865. She was alive in this state until 1893. She buried 4 of her 7 children before she buried herself. I bought the rest of the collection from the Charleston estate 11 months ago, and the original ledger now belongs to me." The page in your case is the only one in this building that is still legally yours. I did not come to take it back. I came to read her name out loud in this room, which I have now done. The ballroom did not move. A board member at table 6 let out a single, sharp breath. Justice Boudreau stood up, slowly, stepped into the open space between Shaq and Beauregard, and said, in a voice no one in the room could have predicted she was waiting to use, "My grandmother was Annie's youngest sister's daughter. I have been on the board of this society for 19 years. I have been waiting 19 years for somebody to read that page." Beauregard Lemoyne IV, $1.8 billion, the great-great-grandson of the man in the portrait, said nothing. His glass of bourbon was still in his hand. He did not appear to know it was. Tobias Green was crying without realizing it. Then Shaq did the thing nobody was ready for. He turned to Beauregard and said, in a voice almost gentle, "Sir, I am not going to ask you to apologize. I do not need that from you. I am going to ask you one thing only. The library upstairs has the rest of the ledger pages your grandfather refused to share with the family. I would like to read them with you. Not at me, with you. There are names in those pages that belong to people in this room, and people in this city, and people who have been waiting longer than you and I have been alive. The work of reading them is the work of this society from this evening forward. If you would like to do that work alongside the rest of us, you are welcome to. If not, the work will continue without you." He said the words that, 4 days later, would be the most screenshotted 6-second clip on the internet for a week. In the same gentle voice, he said, "Her name was Cordelia. Say it out loud." Beauregard Lemoyne IV, after a silence so long the candles flickered in the chandeliers, said, in a voice that did not sound like his own, "Cordelia." Justice Boudreau closed her eyes. Tobias Green sat down on the floor by the donor's wall. Camille Devereaux had stopped writing entirely. Shaq did one last thing before the night was over. He turned to Tobias Green, on the floor by the wall, and he said, "Son, what's your last name?" Tobias said, "Green, sir." Shaq nodded. "Mr. Green, there is going to be a fellowship announced on Monday morning, in your name and in Justice Boudreau's name, for archival research into the pre-war records of the parishes south of here. The seed funding is in place. You will be the inaugural fellow if you want it." Tobias could not speak. He nodded once. Shaq turned to Justice Boudreau. "Your Honor, I am going to need somebody who knows how to read a record without flinching to chair the committee. If you have the time." Justice Boudreau said, "I have the time." Shaq turned to the room. He said only, "Cordelia O'Neill Carter Williams, born 1825, died 1893, mother of 7, grandmother of 19, great-great-grandmother of one man currently standing in this room. We will not forget her name again." Then he folded the photocopy back into the portfolio and walked out of the Lemoyne mansion, and the French doors closed behind him with a small, soft click. And the ballroom did not move for almost a full minute before anybody spoke. So what did everybody in that ballroom learn that night? A billionaire learned that the past you decide to ignore continues to walk around the building with you, and that names spoken out loud do not get unsaid. A young archivist named Tobias Green learned that the 4 years he had spent in a tuxedo that did not fit him had been training for a single evening when a name he had been quietly reading on a page would be read in front of 230 people. A retired judge named Marguerite Boudreau learned that the 19 years she had been waiting on the board had not been waiting for nothing. A reporter named Camille Devereaux learned that the story she had been sent to cover was a different story entirely. And a man in a simple gray suit learned, again, what his mother had told him so many times on the front steps in East Orange, that it had stopped being a sentence and become weather. They will tell you your story doesn't go back. You don't let it go. You go find it. He had let his stepfather's rule make him patient enough. He had let his mother's rule make him stubborn enough. Philip's voice in the back of his mind, 4 years gone, said the thing it had always said. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. He had not been a reaction in front of the fireplace. He had been a response. He had also been a great-great-grandson. And Cordelia, somewhere in the back of his mind, 7 years old on page 47 in 1832, was finally being addressed by her name in a room that had owned her once. He never forgot. And neither should you. If this story moved you tonight, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hit that like button so the algorithm shows this story to one more person who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because this is what we do here. We tell the stories where the quiet ones win. The next video in your queue is the one about the small library in Mississippi where Shaq found the second ledger. We will see you there. Paste your script.